Good afternoon, Norie.
Hi there, Patricio. Nice to
Where are you from?
You mean like originally?
Yeah.
Well, there are many ways to answer that. I suppose the cosmos, Earth, and more specifically, I was born and brought up in Virginia, but
Okay.
I've lived in different parts of the world, so I feel like a global citizen.
Where are you right now? Ecuador, right?
Ecuador, yes, South Central Ecuador.
And how long have you been in Ecuador?
Well, we came here in 2007, and bought the farm, but
hmm
we've been back and forth, so I'd say probably a total of about 6, 7 years.
Okay.
But
And do you have like a retreat center down there?
we do. We have a small B&B, and we're building out some other structures for guests. And yes, we have people coming from various parts of the world to visit us. Our place is called the Garden of Paradise.
hmm
And it really, that's our idea. Was we bought a semi-abandoned weed overgrown farm with, it was really a mess, but it was in a very pretty location,
hmm
and we were basically spiritually hijacked. Something wanted to happen here, and we were
hmm
the stewards, so
I
that's
know,
how we ended up here.
I know
We
the
had no
feeling.
intention of buying land in Ecuador.
What are those plants that I see behind you, kind of to the right?
That looks like I think you're probably referring, is it a tree?
Uh, it looks kind of like a plant, like a cactus or something.
Oh, there's a pitahaya, which is a type of, I
Oh
guess, a
yeah.
type of cactus or something. It has a gorgeous flower. It's a very
I love
large,
pitahaya. I love pitahaya. Do you know how you
it's
say pitahaya in English?
dragon fruit.
Dragon fruit. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Um,
kind of an interesting name. It sort of looks a little dragony, doesn't it?
yeah. Now, I heard that you actually retired at 26 and started writing books. How did you pull that off?
20,
25? You
yeah,
just realized you got
25 actually. Yeah.
addicted to the paycheck?
Well, what happened was I didn't really feel as if I had much choice. I came home from work one evening and I was feeling very antsy, and I'd never felt like that before, and I didn't like feeling like that. So when I got back to my third floor walk-up apartment, I threw myself in a big overstuffed chair in the living room, and I went infinite, and we're kind of opening out in all directions. And I said, okay, God, I don't like feeling like this, and I know that you know why I'm feeling like this, and
hmm
I want you to know I'm sitting here in this chair until you tell me why I'm feeling like this. And it took maybe 10, 15 minutes, and all of a sudden it was like, boom, the proverbial 20 tons of brick on top of my head. And I realized I was getting addicted to the steady paycheck.
hmm
And that if I got addicted to the steady paycheck, I might forget who I am and what I came here to this earth to do.
So then
So I then had huh?
you became an
But then
environmental activist.
I was already an environmental activist, but I was able to dedicate full time to doing what I basically retired to do what made absolute sense to me for the rest of my life.
hmm
And that is what I've done. And it's an amazing, satisfying thing to do,
hmm
to be able to wake up each morning and go, what's important to do today?
And
And when you live like this,
what is important? What does make
I,
sense?
well, what makes sense to me first and foremost is to maintain this connection with the infinite in an ongoing way, moment by moment. And then when I do that, all kinds of things show up to do, and I recognize them because my energy goes up. And somehow also people show up or resources show up to support it, and you just keep taking one step after the other.
Society has undergone some massive transformations in the last 60, 70 years, and it brings new opportunities, but also new challenges. And if we're going to benefit from this more metamorphosis, what do we need to do?
Well, I do think it's a pretty good prescription to practice connecting with the infinite moment by moment. I mean, it's initially a little challenging, but it's like any muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets, and you know when you're not connected, and then you can get connected again. And so I think that's the first thing to do. I also think that we have, I mean, I've been now, I just turned 75, so I've been doing this now for 50 years, half a century. And you begin to see, I also got, let me say that I got trained early on when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I got trained in systems thinking. And so I've been able to take this amazing training that I received in 1966 and use it in looking for leverage points for transforming human civilization. I don't know if you've seen my TEDx talk, but I go into some of the elements that I see we need to do differently in order to transform human civilization in a way that we will, one, survive, and two, prosper, because we're doing a lot of things really wrong right now.
Such as?
Well, I'll tell you, a core thing that I see is that we have designed the money system really badly. I like to point out that there are two words from ancient Greek, oikos nomos and oikos logos. Oikos logos means ecology. It's translated as ecology, and oikos nomos is translated as economy. And oikos logos, if you break it apart and you look at the roots of the words, there are two words there. One, oikos means home, and that it refers to the earth. Logos means logic, or also deep structures. So it's the deep structures of the earth. Whereas oikos nomos is also home, but it's the rules of the home. So we've designed the rules of the home without paying attention to the deep structures or the deep logic of the earth. We need to redesign the global economic and financial system so that we're supporting the deep structures of the home. We're supporting a healthy ecological framework. Otherwise, we're just going to keep going down over the cliff, right? I mean, that's where we're heading right now.
What are some examples of more ecologically sound money systems?
Well, look at the key thing here, I would say, is to look at the reward and incentive system. And also the fact that we are, let's look at the reward and incentive system. If you cut down a tree, you can sell the board feet and you make money. As long as that tree is growing, you're not being rewarded. You're actually having to put money into maintenance.
So, I personally wonder how much of this cutting down trees is necessary, maybe just for show, when there's perfectly biodegradable ways of making paper, like through hemp.
Yeah, hemp. Another really good one is water hyacinth. Water hyacinth. I met a guy from the Philippines, a scientist, who had figured out 150 different uses of a plant that's considered a national pest in the United States, clogging up rivers and so forth. And instead, what if we were to harvest this pest? I mean, you can make currency grade paper. You can make cloth out of water hyacinth.
Amazing.
But there are lots of things where people, like right now, because of the Industrial Revolution and the whole extraction of oil has become a kind of a king or a kingmaker. And right now, the major players on the board in terms of what I call the big boys, they are taking advantage of oil because they've got the control of it. And if you look at the different wars that we've seen in the last 20, 30, 50 years, a whole lot of it has to do with oil and control of oil. Venezuela is a perfect example.
Oh, yeah.
Syria, Iraq, Iran, all of these, it's all about oil.
And that's sad, because how much of biodegradable technology do we have even now potentially for plastics? Talk to us about the butterfly analogy, and then we want to get into 5G and the local activism you're doing.
Okay. The butterfly, what happened for me was I met an ambassador a retired ambassador who gave me a flag, and it had just about 6,000 dots on it, black dots on a white background. And then in the middle, there was a white area with a dot in it. And I asked him what that was about. And he said the single dot in the middle represented all of the firepower used in World War II, including the 2 bombs dropped on Japan. And that the rest of the dots represented the amount of firepower we had in the world at that time, which was almost 6,000 times World War II. And I spent 3 days looking at this flag. He said he'd only made 6 of them. You know, one of them he'd given to the Pope, one to the Dalai Lama, and I don't know who the others were, but I'd love to meet those people. And so anyway, I looked at that flag for 3 days, just feeling quite despairing, because even though I was involved in anti-nuclear activism at the time, I had no idea we had that many nuclear bombs related to the firepower used during World War II. And so the third day, I needed a break. So I took a walk, and I was thinking, you know, we need to create a civilization where, instead of it being based on fear, which the nuclear weapons represented, we need to find something based on love and on, you know, a healthy environment, healthy people. And so coming back from my walk about an hour later, I saw a little damp patch in the woods where there were maybe 5 or 6 little butterflies. They looked like little monarchs. And they looked so peaceful. I just stopped and watched them for a while. And then I had the thought, you know, humanity needs to transform every bit as much as a caterpillar when it turns into a butterfly. So that set me on a quest. And then I was giving speeches at the time for different groups. And I was giving a talk about, you know, the need to transform, and I used my metaphor of caterpillar turning into butterfly, and all of a sudden, up there on the stage in front of a couple thousand people, I had this, hey, I wonder how the caterpillar butterfly does it. I bet we can learn from that. And I almost said, hey, I got to go now. I got something I got to do. But I kept my cool. I stayed up there, finished the talk. And then as I came off the stage, about a dozen people came up to talk to me, and I said, I just blurted out, I said, hey, I wonder how the caterpillar butterfly does it. I bet we can learn from that. And one of the guys who had come up to talk to me said, well, that's exactly why I came up here, Norie. I wanted to let you know that there's new cells that start to appear inside the caterpillar after it goes in a chrysalis. And that they're called imaginal cells. Well, over the next 3 years, I met all these entomologists, more than I ever met in my whole life. And each one had a piece of the story for me. And at the end, when I got it all put together, I met a lepidopterist who's expert in butterflies. And I asked her if this was correct, what I'd pieced together. She said it was very.
What's that word again for an expert in butterflies?
Lepidopterist. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
And what did she say?
She said that that what I had pieced together was quite accurate. And so then a short while later, I was at a friend's house and came out one morning early, and she said, you know that story, Norie, you've been telling about the caterpillar butterfly, I think that would make a great children's book. And I went, oh, you're right, for children of all ages, you know, the child in each of us. And so I turned around, went back. I had a writing prayer that I used, and I did my writing prayer, and in about 45 minutes, the book was written. And I almost didn't have to edit it. It was really just kind of taking notes. And so that has become a meme now that's being used apparently all over the world. I keep having people contacting me from all over the place. And so anyway, that was quite an amazing breakthrough. I talk about the butterfly metaphor in the TEDx talk. Mm-hmm. And
we encourage everybody to see the videos on YouTube and on TED Talks with Norie. Now, Norie, I understand, I was in Vilcabamba last year, and I was doing some reportage and had my camera, and I went into a cyber and I heard these two women talking in English about 5G and how there were some local activists, and I offered to interview them, and they said, no, we're only staying here a day, but you really should talk to Norie Huddle. And I understand that you've actually gotten together a petition to take to Claro, the major phone company, and Guayaquil, talking about some of these health catastrophes that are going to happen as a result of 5G.
Well, we did present that, and right now one of our teammates is working on the first draft of a kind of a more formal letter that we're going to present again. What we presented was in Loja, our provincial capital. Two members of our team were in Guayaquil, and they tried to present it, but they weren't able to do so. Recently, one of the things I did that was quite interesting was I was invited to be a panelist on a panel of 4 people. The other 3 were engineers for Mincotel, which is the FCC,
Mm-hmm.
and for Huawei, which is a Chinese company that's introducing all the infrastructure here in Ecuador. Mm-hmm. And then a third guy who's with Movie Star, which is one of the providers.
Sure.
So that was really interesting because, they talked about how this was, the most wonderful thing since sliced bread at least.
Well, you're even seeing front page articles in the Ecuadorian newspaper about how this is going to connect us with the Internet of Things. You probably speak pretty good Spanish. Have you thought of writing articles in the newspapers, sending them into local magazines, anything like that?
Well, I did this presentation and we taped it. So I do have this presentation, and I was thinking I would take some of the elements of that. I prefer not to be the out front person for this. However, the way I work is a little different. I can probably pass some information along to others to publish things, but
yeah.
I tend to use my systems training and find the key people to contact, and then have quiet conversations with people who are in a position to have an influence. So I was able to do that with, just to have a good conversation with one of the people on the panel with me.
And sometimes that's the best thing you can do, is just have a conversation with someone.
Well, have a conversation with, as I say, someone in a key position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we are going to move forward with delivering a formal letter. What's happening right now, Patricio, is that on the all over the world now, people are waking up and realizing that 5G has some extraordinarily dubious characteristics, and that we could be getting into a whole lot of hot water with this, as we did say with glyphosates or with tobacco.
I was watching a presentation yesterday with my students of a scientist, and he had a presentation with all these dots, and he had written a paper, but he was saying that in so much of science and mathematics and philosophy, if the presuppositions are skewed, then all the science and mathematics and philosophy that comes after that is also going to be skewed. So it's important that we get things right on the presuppositional axiomatic level. And I'm thinking about how in the future with 5G, they'll probably find a way to blame the effects of 5G on other things, and then say we need more vaccines, and they're going to call the health effects of 5G, the damaging health effects, they're going to blame it on genetics, and then there's probably going to be new diagnoses. And so the more that we can get the word out, I think the easier it's going to be for future generations.
Well, I think that I first became aware of 5G only in mid-December. And that was when there was a tower that was being built right by the Coliseum in Vilcabamba, maybe around the time you visited. And I learned about this, and I decided, and I heard this term 5G, I'd never heard before, went to the event, and they, the mayor, the president of what's called the Junta Parroquial, which is kind of like a local mayor, gets up to the microphone and tells about 200 300 people present. We won. They're not going to put the tower here. And my organizer brain goes, are you kidding me? They didn't even send their representative. This was for Clado, another provider. And they had requested that the meeting be changed at the last minute from the morning to the afternoon so they could send a representative. They did not send a representative. So all the warning bells went off in my head that because this was supposed to be a socialization meeting where people would say yes or no to this tower, and they saw the handwriting, apparently saw the handwriting.
My friend Scott Nelson, which I think you might even know, he told me last year around this time he was riding his motorcycle into Loja. He just felt such a beam go through him, and he's never felt that before. Just like he was like, ah, and that might have been from the 5G. Norie,
they don't have 5G yet in Loja. It could be from 4G, but the point is
they were doing some testing, though, right? They were doing some testing around this time.
I would doubt it, but it's, you know, I cannot say because I wasn't there. I don't know, but the symptoms are very strong.
What are the symptoms? What are typical symptoms from 5G?
Oh, well, let's talk about the symptoms of just EMF in general. Let me just say something about EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, and why these are so damaging. It's basically because like for electricity, you have a fairly smooth wave, and it kind of goes like this, so your body can adjust to it. What happens with electromagnetic frequencies is that they have a square wave, and it's pulsing. It's a pulsated wave. So, and it pulsates in different patterns, so that your body cannot adjust to it, and that's very damaging to the DNA. It's damaging to the mitochondria, which are like the little power plants inside of each cell.
Is 5G a microwave? Is that safe to say that 5G is in the microwave range?
Oh yeah, it's a very short frequency, and it's going to be far worse because not only are you going to have these towers, little towers, mini towers they call them, I think they call them small cell towers, close to your house, because the short wave needs to be closer in order to penetrate through the building. But
and they say just being in Gabriel Cousins, a naturopathic physician, he said that just being in a city that's wired for 5G, let alone if you have a cell phone or not, it's going to be like being in a microwave oven for 17 minutes a day with it on 4. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I have heard that the smart meters are way more damaging than cell phone radiation. And if the smart meters go to 5G, there's going to be a lot of exposure to radiation. I don't have a cell phone. I never had a cell phone because I'm so sensitive to it. I'm using fiber optic connection right now. But
well, that's great. That's great. Well, one of the things I learned just recently, and I can send you a bunch of links if you want to include them. One of the things I learned recently is that apparently there's a lawsuit being put against the FCC by a group called the Irregulators, because the FCC is really a bought and paid for agency that's not doing its job to protect the public. It's been funded by the telecommunications agencies. They're using
and they've actually been able to push on the world a lot of toxins. Like, why do you think Ecuador puts fluoride in the salt? They're listening to the regulatory agencies in the U.S.
Right. Well, the point I want to make, though, with the 5G rollout is that the way they're funding that is they're taking money that was supposed to be used for putting in fiber optic and for other things, and they are using that in the rollout. And what's happening is the Irregulators are suing the FCC because they're saying they're stealing from the public to do this rollout of an untested technology, 5G. Now, you asked about some of the symptoms. I do want to mention that because I think that it's an important list. For the brain, you have headaches, dizziness, nausea, difficulty concentrating, depression, anxiety, memory loss, insomnia, fatigue, tremors, muscle spasms, tingling, altered reflexes, muscle and joint pain.
Wow.
For the heart,
that's
you've
amazing.
got,
What do you have for the heart?
palpitations, arrhythmia, chest pain or chest pressure, low or high blood pressure. For respiratory, you have sinusitis, you have bronchitis, and for the eyes, pressure in or behind the eyes and deteriorating vision and cataracts.
And this is from 5G or electromagnetic radiation in general?
Electromagnetic radiation in general. Okay, and here's another piece, and this I presented in my talk when I was on the panel up in Loja just a couple of weeks ago. The Lloyd's of London, and there's also another insurance company that's considered like the gold standard. Lloyd's is the gold standard. And then this other one called Swiss RE. Both of them have refused to give coverage to health damages caused by accumulated exposure to electromagnetic frequencies. Wow. So what does that tell you? If you're following the money, and these guys who are the gold standard for insurance companies are refusing to pay for any illness directly or indirectly caused by electromagnetic frequencies, that tells you something. And they're using, in comparison, they're using the example of asbestos. I think even more interesting as an example is glyphosates. And you may know that recently Monsanto was sued successfully for $2 billion, B as in baby, dollars by someone for cancer that they claimed was caused by glyphosates. And
I think it really messes up the gut. I do believe that one day Monsanto will be out of business. It's just come out that they were running psychops on people and stuff like that, but they had intelligence agents working for them. I think
right. It's all about following the money.
Go ahead.
One of the things that you have to look at is what is the money for the telecommunications company? First off, they're ripping off the people to pay for the rollout using monies that are supposed to be going into safe fiber optic connections, and they're using that to roll out 5G, and they're making all kinds of claims about the technology that are not proving out. They're causing health damages, and they're claiming that there's no research proving that health damages are caused by electromagnetic frequency.
And you see
But they're citing studies that are 1996, and there's a lot of, something like 10,000 new studies that are showing that there are health damages.
Yeah, and this generation just have had their stomachs washed with glyphosate. And people say, well, it's too expensive to eat organic, but what are the costs? Well, Norie, I said I was going to keep you here for 15 minutes, and it's almost been like a 35. I do want to add one thing though about the Internet of Things. You see these futuristic movies where they have these self-driving cars and their houses are hooked up to all these virtual reality, and people are putting on glasses and they're seeing like a virtual reality, and it's kind of, I don't think that anybody's going to be able to withstand the amount of electromagnetic smog. So maybe over the long run, it'll have a kind of self-trimming or self-eliminating.
Well, I'm still of the mind that we're going to stop it.
Well, we appreciate your optimism, Norie Huddle, and we really appreciate you coming in and talking with us today. And I'd love to do it again sometime. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I'd say just keep in mind that this is a new set of technologies. The health conditions of young people, like the millennials, we've never had a deterioration in health the way is happening with millennials starting around age 27. And this totally coincides with the excessive use of vaccines. And there are synergistic effects. In other words, there are cumulative effects where there's interactions between things like
synergistic toxicity, as Dane Wigington said.
Yeah, it's. I think that people are waking up. It's going to take a real groundswell, but I'm pretty optimistic because since I started studying this in mid December of last year, which isn't very long ago, I've seen enormous increase in articles, videos, awareness, groups organizing, and so that encourages me.
Well, thank you very much, Norie. You have a wonderful day now.
You too, and thanks so much. Have a
Bye.
great one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. Ahora. Finalizar la reunión para todos.